And welcome back to day 2 to the 10th annual National Community College Peacebuilding Seminar. I'm really glad to see everyone this morning, and we will get going in a few minutes. We'll just do just a little bit of catching up for a few minutes. From 12 to 12:15. Yesterday I had a lot more to cover. Today, not so much to cover. But one of the things Sarah presented yesterday, that was great.
Unmute.
Am I muted? No, okay. And Sarah, thank you. I mean, my wife Lena walked away thinking about all the ways that she's going to integrate it. She actually played the other role player, right? And so she and I were talking about, because she teaches nursing and she does a lot of role playing in her students, and the idea of thinking about emotions rather than trying to kind of get to the thing itself is not something that she generally thinks about. So that was pretty enlightening, I thought, what you guys did.
Thank you. Yeah, the simulation world seems more about practicing like specific skills for the job rather than actually exploring the emotional landscape or the sort of larger aspects of the character, I find.
Yeah, I know in our simulations that we do, because it's designed to prepare people for a profession, we do tend to spend most of our time on the skills, right? And thinking about, well, do they get what they're supposed to do, rather than thinking about how they're feeling, even though we do that. I mean, Will's part of that also. And we do spend some time about, are you anxious, how you feel, those kind of things. But I think we could focus on a little bit more. So as folks are coming in, welcome to day 2. It's nice to see everyone. I have turned on the recording. We will be recording again today. As we are starting, you should see the same slide from yesterday, basically. And I'm actually going to go through that. I'm going to admit people. And just to remind people, we are in day 2. And so today we have presentations from Tyler, also known as Chase Olson, and Heather Payne and Nanette Iraberta. Tyler, and I'll introduce him appropriately in a minute or two, is the program manager of the Peace and Conflict Studies Certificate Program at Cuyahoga Community College. And I've known Tyler for a long time, so I'm always glad to see him and find out what's going on in kind of Cleveland land, so to speak. But so it's glad he's there. And then Heather and Nanette are both graduates of community colleges. Heather went to Tulsa Community College in Oklahoma, and then Nanette went to the Southern Maine Community College. And they've just gone on to doing fabulous careers, but they also work with the Forage Center. And
recording in progress.
So it's good. Yeah, I would remind folks that if you are not speaking, to keep your, well, let me just keep going through my slides then. All right, let me go through my housekeeping, because it's enough people here to remind people of housekeeping, right? All sessions are being recorded and will be archived at our YouTube channel. We're creating a live transcription for those who want it. So you can see that it is being closed captioned. You should be able to see that. And then we have a live transcription. If you want to this morning, I want to really encourage people and do this every time we get together, because what ends up happening is that, not everybody's in the same session all the time. So reintroduce yourself, tell us your name, your organization, your entity, location, contact information, interest. I would also recommend that as you, in introducing yourself in the chat, that you also use your name tag, which is really great, and consider including your pronouns in the name tag also, which I think is really helpful also. You don't have to keep your camera on, of course, but that's helpful to presenters. I always say that because as a person who spends a lot of time on Zoom, if what I'm talking to is a lot of black screens, it's not as it's not as reinforcing. It's not as connecting as when I see people, right? And even if you're twiddling your hair or drinking your coffee, okay, that's better than not seeing you at all, right? Mute yourself unless you're speaking. You've received links for this weekend and the other weekends. And in fact, what I've been doing is I've been sending out kind of a reminder, which you all got probably about 20 minutes ago. But if you're not getting something, just contact Priscilla at the Forage Center. Each session is about 45 minutes with an additional 15 minutes allotted for Q&A or break. So we will start at 12:15, go to 1, take that 15 minutes that we might need if there are more questions for Tyler, or he wants to go a little bit over. Then at 1:15, Nanette and Heather will talk about their experiences and talk about careers. And then at 2 o'clock, we were officially done. But if you wanted to stick around for a few minutes and they would answer some more questions. And during Q&A, hand raising is probably best, unless we just are really a small group and you just open your mic. So I just want to make it kind of good for everybody and comfortable for everybody. So I'm going to end my show. That's what I went over last time, and bring the screen back together. And let's see if I have to let anybody in. Looks like I've let everybody in. So good morning again. Looks like there are 12 of us this morning. I am just going to go through and say hi, Susan Cushman. Good morning. Susan's from Nassau Community College and Delphi University. Sarah Bowman is back with us from Uppsala University and Austin Community College. So she's in Sweden. Tulin Levitas from retired professor from Montgomery College. Will Mule. Will is from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, where they are a doctoral student. John Haas from Cerritos College in California. So we've got all our coasts covered and beyond. Tyler is from Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland. Elizabeth Salzberger Gerber is from Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I'm trying to remember that. I don't know. And Tu Van True too. Good morning, Tu. Tu is from Vancouver. So we've got somebody from Vancouver. So we really are crossing the planet today. So that's really great. Tia, and is it Falana Lee? Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Maybe you are students. Tia, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, where are you physically today?
I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Excellent. Are you a student or faculty member?
Yes, I'm a student.
Are you a student of Dr. Epperson's?
Yes.
Okay, so Cindy Epperson, who's on our board, can't make it, but she invited her students from St. Louis Community College to join us. So I'm glad that you're here. And is it Falana Lee?
You can call me Lana.
Lana, where are you calling from? Where are you from?
I'm calling from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, so you're also in Dr. Epperson's class.
Yes.
Oh, excellent, excellent, great. And then someone is calling at, there's a phone number 314-599-2740. Can you tell us?
I think that was Falana. Instead, Tia wrote in the chat.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Sorry for the confusion there. Okay. Okay, great. I wasn't been reading my chat. So, okay. So good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and start introducing Ty and kind of turning it over to him for the next 45 minutes or so. And even though we've been doing questions at the end, Ty, if you want to do questions as you go, it's really your show for the next 45 minutes. There are people who have been coming in late, so I'll probably add other people in as we go. So let me say some good things about Ty. And I've known Ty for a number of years. It's always glad to see him. He is the, as I mentioned, the program manager for the Conflict Resolution and Peace Studies program at Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland. He is also a founding partner at Reframe Conflict. So hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about his work there. He has a PhD in leadership and change from Antioch University, a master's in conflict resolution from Portland State, and a BA in religious studies from George Fox University. He is the recipient of the 2022 American Political Science Association Community College Award, awarded for exemplary contributions that advance the multifaceted goals of community colleges. Congratulations, Ty. That sounds like a big deal to me. From 2007 to 2009, he lived and worked in Honduras, which solidified his passion for teaching conflict resolution and conflict transformation. So I am going to make sure, Ty, that you can share your screen and turn it over to you. Good morning, Ty. Good to see you.
Great. It's great to see you too, David, and it's good to see the rest of you on here. And yeah, I'm just excited to be a part of the session this year. The last couple of years, I haven't been able to participate. I've had too many conflicts in finishing my doctoral work, which prevented me from being able to join. But it's great to be here, David. And thank you for the introduction. I didn't realize all of that was going to be read. I feel intimidated a little bit by that person you were talking about. Yeah, I've been at Cuyahoga Community College for, it'll be 10 years in February, which is about the time that we met, David, when I first joined the college. So it's almost been a decade. And I was born and raised on the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, Seattle and Portland areas. And I really, after doing my master's degree work, I really wanted to be at a community college. And so I was looking for different opportunities all throughout the US. And it just so happened that there was an opportunity in Cleveland, Ohio, which I had never been to the state of Ohio up until then. And I moved, packed up everything and moved across country. And I've been here for 10 years now. And I love it. I find so much meaning in the work of that I'm involved in at the community college level. My primary role is managing and teaching in our conflict resolution and peace studies certificate program, which is an academic program housed in our political science division. And I just have over the years been able to see students come through our program and then see them leave and go off and do just incredible things in the world, both here in our community in Northeast Ohio, in the greater Cleveland area, but also, we have a few alumni of our program, one that's working as an ombudsman in Australia, someone that's doing some work in Northern Ireland, doing, I think, restorative justice and dialogue facilitation. We have a student that's a fellow at a prestigious organization this year. And so I just find so much meaning in being able to contribute some small piece to students' experience and to their learning process. And today we're going to talk a little bit about, reflective practice. I'm not going to get too deep into like the theory. I would imagine that a lot of you are already familiar with this concept of reflective practice, and towards the end we might even talk about a similar and connected concept of reflexive practice, which is slightly different. But there is a relationship between these two concepts. And so my hope is that we are able to have some conversation throughout this session. I am going to also share an activity that I do in our conflict resolution and peace studies capstone course that is really about establishing some form of reflective practice for our students. And it's an activity that when I'm teaching that course, I do as well. So recognizing that I need to continue to practice, learn, reflect, and re-evaluate and enhance the way that I practice and do things. So I'm going to share my slides. If I can figure out how to do this, 1 second, I think I got it. Great. hopefully everyone can see. It's not showing up quite right on my screen. Just a second.
Yeah, you want to change your view. Yeah, you want to start your slideshow.
Yeah, except I have too many things on my screen, so it's hard to, there we go. Awesome. Does that look good?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So generally speaking, we're going to be, exploring this idea of reflective practice and its relationship to, teaching peace, conflict, and social justice type courses. I find that, in these more applied social science type courses, reflective practice is particularly important to the learning process. And so here's sort of a really, step-by-step overview of what we're going to touch on today. We're going to explore what is reflective practice, explore what is its value and why is it important in these types of courses, in the work that we're doing as educators for peace and conflict resolution and conflict transformation and social justice related topics. But also I do want to, I am aware that not all of us are educators in the traditional sense. We don't all teach in front of a classroom of students, right? And so I want to be aware of this idea that we can explore this in our own context, with our own practice, not just in the classroom. I'm not going to get into a deep overview of models and theories just because we don't have much time today. And I really want to set aside some time for this activity and the debrief that follows. And then I'll do that example of a creative way that I've integrated reflective practice, and I'll talk a little bit about the impact that's had on students over the years, and you'll all be able to experience it a little bit. And then my hope is towards the end, we'll have some conversation about how do we design, opportunities for reflective practice in the classroom, but also to think about how do we design, our own reflective practice. The one thing that I am a proponent of, that there's no specific model or template that works in every context for everyone. And so part of what I'm hoping today brings up some ideas about how we can, think creatively to design reflective practice activities or processes that we can use in our classroom or in our own lives. And then we'll take some time to debrief and do some Q&A. So here's where I want to start. I would love to hear from you all, and maybe this is best to do in the chat, because we're only going to take, a couple of minutes here to think about, from your own perspective or experience, how do you understand or define reflective practice? So think about that question first, and then following that, once you've spent some time to think about that and maybe enter some thoughts into the chat or unmute yourself and share out loud, the follow-up question will be, and we'll get to this secondary, is how do you engage in some type of reflective practice? So let's focus on the first question to begin. But what do you all, understand reflective practice to be from your own perspective? Okay, so I see some comments in the chat. I'm going to just speak to a few of these. So Sarah says, reflective practice is taking content from the course and reflecting on how it might pertain to one's personal experience, insights, and life. I ask my students to do reflection questions in discussion posts and journals. Great. David says the ability to think about what and how some action has taken place. Absolutely. Yeah. Susan shares, considering the process or method of action and possibly the cost and benefit analysis. I'll wait and see if there's any others. And again, as I mentioned, there are, literally dozens of different models and definitions around reflective practice. And part of what I'm hoping today is like, I'm not giving ones, I will be giving a specific definition, but it's more of an open-ended definition. And there is some space to think about this creatively, because there isn't one like set way of thinking about reflective practice, but there are a couple of key principles that we'll discuss. So the secondary question is, and this is more of a rhetorical question. You don't necessarily have to answer this, but like, I can think for a moment, and I'll hold some space, maybe 30 seconds. How do you engage in reflective practice, or where do you engage in reflective practice, or something that might be similar? I know we haven't defined reflective practice yet. And if you want to just jot down a couple of things or just hold them in your mind, that's okay. Will shares, building off the first question and building off of David's answer, I'll add creating some sort of action plan related to what you would do differently next time. Yes. I encourage my students to keep a looping sketchbook during class. Oh, I love that idea. I want to learn more about that, Will. And this idea of these loops, these feedback loops, right? Then informing and influencing our shifts in thinking and changes in the ways we approach things, right? And I'll say, Tuvan shares to integrate and with personal experiences and concepts learned. Yeah. And then finally, David says, as an instructor, I emphasize it with my students. I teach a facilitation class and they journal every class. I have them read the attached article first. Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing which article that is. Great. Okay, so thank you all for sharing a little bit about, what your interpretation or understanding or definition is of reflective practice, and hopefully you were able to think about, how does it play into your own life? And for some of us, I think it's important to recognize that in some way we all probably have a form of reflective practice, whether or not we call it that or recognize it as that. For others of us, we have a very defined form of reflective practice, which might be a part of our routine or a way that we go about journaling, or a process or ritual that we engage on a regular basis, where we are reflecting on experience and thinking about what we would be doing, what we would do different next time. So that's where I'm going to shift us. I'm going to define this notion of reflective practice and talk about a couple of the core kind of pillars or elements of any reflective practice model. So Finley states that reflective practice is the process of learning through and from experience towards gaining new insight of self and or practice. This often involves examining assumptions of everyday practice. It also tends to involve the individual practitioner, and I'll add educator and student as well, in being self-aware and critically evaluating their own responses to practice situations. The point is to recapture practice experience and mull them over critically in order to gain new understanding, so improve in future practice. This is understood as part of the process of lifelong learning. And so I know this is a long definition, and I recognize even like I stumble through it, even though I've read this definition probably a dozen times over the years. It is a more open-ended definition. It includes a lot. But this whole notion of practice is not like that. It's not the same as like, setting aside time to practice a piano, but it's this idea of like every time we are out in the world engaging in some form of work that we are involved in, we are practicing, right? Just like a doctor practices medicine. And in the course of that practice, the hope is that we would continue to learn and evolve and grow and develop and hone our skills and our abilities and grow our capacities for doing things better. So the three of the kind of core elements of reflective practice are, having an experience, reflecting on that experience, and then having that reflection then inform action in the future. And then in our new experience, having it, reflecting on it, and then having that reflection inform our action. For me, a lot of what I teach is conflict resolution skills, and conflict transformation skills, as well as dialogue facilitation. And so this is very critical to, the work that I do with the students. And David, I see that you posted Moon Park. I have my students in their capstone course read that.
That's great.
The park.
It's a great article on showing how to write in a reflective way.
It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So thank you for posting that. I would encourage everyone, if you haven't read or looked at or utilized Moon's The Park article, check it out. It's simple, but it does a really good job of kind of differentiating between different forms of reflection, and the different depths at which we can reflect. So in my class, especially the capstone class for the conflict resolution program, I'm asking students to reflect on, how do they show up in conflict? What are they thinking about? What are they experiencing? What's going on for them internally? So that they can become more consciously aware. And in that process of becoming more consciously aware of like what is going on for them in conflict, they can then make more conscious decisions when they are then engaging in conflict in the future. And so that's part of how it fits into the work that I do. And I'm gonna show that in just a moment. But before we do, I want us to just take a second to again reflect on this idea of like, what are some of the potential benefits of reflective practice within the context of teaching and learning, within your own context if you don't identify with the actual teaching portion of this. And so feel free to, share in the chat any benefits that you see as being important to the practice of reflection or reflective practice. And then I'm gonna highlight a few that I have identified both in my research and reading over the years, but also what I've seen in students who genuinely and authentically engage in reflective practice over the course of a semester or over the course of their studies in our conflict resolution and peace studies certificate. So one very clear benefit is an enhanced sense of self-awareness, being more aware of what you are feeling and what you are thinking, and being able to reflect on those feelings and thinking. That is something that has come out of, that has been very apparent in my students' experience, particularly as it relates to conflict resolution, conflict management, and conflict transformation skills and learning. A deeper integration of the learning. I think this is a really important part of reflective practice. One of the things that you'll see when we do this activity in a second is that I'm asking students to reflect specifically on concepts and ideas that we're talking about in class as it relates to them. Having them think about, okay, I've learned about this abstract concept or idea, but how does this relate to me and my experience in conflict? So it becomes more real for them when they have a semi-structured space to reflect. What I've found is when there is regular reflective practice, and regular authentic engagement with these topics increases, because of this idea of what we're learning about actually makes sense to me personally. I can see the connections between this particular skill or theory that we're discussing as it relates to conflict resolution to my own personal life. And so I am more invested and engaged with the topic and with the learning process as a result. And that oftentimes comes through the initial engagement of reflective practice. It promotes critical thinking. I'm going to go through these last a couple of these pretty quickly. A heightened sense of contextual nuance and understanding complexity and beginning to think in utilizing systems thinking. Now, I will recognize that there is a caveat to this. Part of my background is in my doctoral work was understanding adult development in relationship to how individuals construct meaning around conflict when they are indeed in conflict with others. And depending on where an individual is in their own adult development journey, does influence their capacity to engage in complexity and systems thinking. So the traditional students oftentimes are at a point in development, in their adult development, where psychologically they can genuinely and naturally engage in complexity and systems thinking. However, reflective practice provides an opportunity for them to start exploring these playing with these ideas, and there is a small group of research that says reflective practice actually helps in the development of our consciousness and our own adult development psychologically, and so we're contributing not only to the growth of learning around certain concepts and its integration into one's life, but also around an individual's psychological development and meaning-making development, which is really cool. And then opportunity, the piece that I really like in my class, and I think you'll see this when we do this activity in a second. I know we don't have a lot of time, but there are opportunities for the empathy development. One of the things, and I'll highlight this after we go through the activity, is that there are, as many of us are probably familiar with, there are different forms of empathy that we as humans are able to experience and practice. So there's affective empathy, which is that idea that we feel what another person feels, right? Which is a common form of empathy that most adult humans are capable of. But then there's also this idea of cognitive empathy, which is more of that perspective taking, being able to think about what where the other person is coming from beyond just feeling what they're feeling. And this, in some forms of reflective practice, it creates space for an individual to develop that cognitive empathy, or that develop those perspective taking skills as they're thinking about and reflecting on an experience that they've had with another person. They can begin to consider, okay, where is this other person coming from based on what I know about them and our relationship, and based on some of the questions I asked them. Final note, there are many other benefits to reflective practice, but it also depends on the context and the focus of the learning, or the context and the focus of what you're engaged in. And so I think that's really important to note. So we're gonna do a quick activity that is sort of a part of a larger thing that I do when I'm teaching our capstone class for the Conflict Resolution and Peace Studies program. One of the things that, this is not the slide that, let me see real quick. Let me go to the right slide. Okay, here we go. One of the things that we teach in our program, and we really try to emphasize and re-emphasize and iterate and reiterate, are a few different concepts related to what causes conflict in the first place. And one of the simple ways that we describe it is that conflict occurs when one's needs, interests, values, and or identity are threatened, or there's the perception that they're being threatened. And so I do this whole piece in our capstone course where I go back through these ideas. I talk about like interests, which, summarized are these transitory desires, wants, or preferences that we have. Some of our interests are short-term, as in when I wake up in the morning, one of my primary interests is getting a cup of coffee or getting some caffeine into my veins. But after I have had that cup of coffee, it's no longer a primary interest of mine. We also have mid-range interests, which might be to, successfully complete the Peacebuilding seminar, or successfully finish the semester and pass our classes, or do well teaching, or etc. And then we also have long-term interests. Maybe we're interested in buying a new car, or buying a house, or getting a PhD, or having a family, etc., etc. If any of those interests are threatened, or we perceive them to be threatened, that's when conflict occurs, right? Even my coffee. If my wife threatens my ability to have a cup of coffee in the morning, that's going to cause some conflict, right? It's minor, silly, but it's real. So the other piece we talk about is values. And again, these are simplified definitions, but like these culturally specific motivations or guiding principles. Sometimes our values are connected to our beliefs. They're connected to our individual ethical and moral leanings. We also have needs, basic human needs, looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or Glasser's human needs theory. Physical and psychological needs. If any of these are threatened, or we perceive them to be threatened, conflict occurs. And then I also go into talking about identity, and how if we feel threatened based on our identity, whether it's our gender, our race, our age, our sexual orientation, etc., that threat or perceived threat can cause conflict. So I share this. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second so I can see all your lovely faces. And I'm gonna pull something up. I do this whole lesson, and I spend a full hour and a half going through this, and we have some conversation and ask students to talk about experiences, their own recent experiences with interpersonal conflict, and to make connections between, okay, was it primarily interest-based? Did it have an element of identity-based conflict? Was it values-based? Was it needs-based, etc.? And really encourage students to start thinking for themselves, what is motivating the conflict, or what is contributing to this conflict that they've experienced. And then what I do about week 3 into the class, when we've covered when we've reviewed some of the things that they should have already learned in their previous coursework, which not always have they, I introduce this idea of the conflict, the interpersonal conflict log. And this is something that I developed as a tool. It's sort of like a journal, but it's almost in app form. And so everyone receives a link, which I'll be sharing with you all a link shortly in a second. And I ask students to fill it out twice a week. And they are asked to think about conflicts that they've experienced, because I guarantee them all that they have experienced some form of conflict, minor or major, in their lives, probably most likely on a daily basis, if not, an hourly basis, whether it's in the workplace or in the classroom. And they have to fill out this link twice a week. And so I'm gonna briefly show you the link and ask you all to fill it out. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about how this connects to reflective practice. So here is a link that I'm sharing. And it's gonna ask for your email. You don't have to put your email in. You can put in my email, put in tieguy2@gmail.com if you don't want to put your email in. Because I collect data with this survey that I then share with the students at points throughout the semester. So I'm gonna share my screen again. I shared this link. Feel free to click on it. And as I'm sharing, as I'm walking through this, I would encourage you each to fill this out as well. This won't take very long, if my technology is going to work. Okay, here we go. Okay, it's not important that you read through all of this. This gives some context for the survey. I really want us to just kind of experience this survey, and you can enter this email in if you want. This is my personal email, and there's some resources. But what I want you to do is think about, where have you experienced a conflict lately? Whether it was this morning, minor or major. It could be an argument over who cleans the cat litter box, or who gets the car today, or what time we're leaving to meet our friends for dinner tonight. It could be a minor argument, or it could be a major conflict that you're having at work, where you're having tension with another colleague over the direction and disagreement around the direction of a project. But I want you to identify, when was the last time you experienced some engagement with this conflict? Was it yesterday afternoon? Was it, at home, or in the community, or at school, or at work? So what was the context? So click on the context. I'm going to click at school. You don't have to fill out this virtual context question. This is if it was virtual. I'm basically asking people to say, was it through Facebook Messenger, or was it texting, or was it somewhere else? So I'll just say texting. Who else was involved in this conflict? Was it with a coworker? Was it with a neighbor? Was it with a partner? Was it with a family member? I'm going to just say with my partner, with my wife. And then briefly describe the incident. And for some students, and I'll share a little bit of this in a second, they'll say, we were fighting over where we were going for Thanksgiving. Were we going to go have Thanksgiving dinner with my family or your family, right? So that was one that came up last year in a couple of people's forms. So where where to go for holiday. Then if you click on the next one, there are a series of questions where I'm asking the student to then, this is the reflective piece. What was my desired result of this situation? What did I want out of the situation? If we were fighting over where to go for Thanksgiving, maybe I really wanted to go to my family's place, right? And then I ask the student to consider, what was at stake for you with regard to needs, interests, values, and identity? And you can click as many boxes as you want, because sometimes these aspects of conflict or these underlying issues that contribute to a conflict overlap. And then I ask students to, speak to these specifically. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be very short, but it's encouraging them to, again, reflect on this experience that they had in conflict. And then I ask them to, was the outcome constructive, or was it unfavorable, or was it mixed or unsure or other? And then ask them to explain. I'm going to just type in a few letters in each of these so that I can move through this. I know we don't have a lot of time, and I want to show a couple of things before. And then the final piece is, how did I feel about this process or interaction? How did I feel, in reflecting back on it, or in it? I specify that you can reflect, how did you feel in it, or how did you feel reflecting back on it? And then I ask students to reflect between the last time they filled out their log, which they're supposed to fill out at least twice a week when they're in the capstone course, and this time, how many conflicts did you have? And usually 3 to 5 is the standard answer that I get from students from doing this for years. And then if there's anything important to this particular scenario, students can optionally put in some more information, and then it submits. I'm not going to show that. Once students submit this, again, they're submitting this at minimum twice a week for about 14 weeks. And so they get a bunch of data. And I'm going to share with you all briefly a snapshot of the data that they get. And I share it at 3 different points in the semester. I share it about 2 weeks into the semester so that they know that this is going somewhere, and they can already begin to see the value. At 2 weeks in, they've only, usually logged 4 or 5 conflicts at that point. But when they get their report back, is what I call them, they're like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. This is what I'm learning about. I'm actually able to look at the data and even reflect at a different level about the conflicts that I'm experiencing. I'm beginning to see some of the trends that that are occurring in my sorry, I'm trying to pull up. Here we go. I'm beginning to see some of the trends in my in where I experience conflict, what types of conflicts I experience, whether my conflicts are based primarily in needs or interests or values, who are most of my conflicts with, and I'll show this really quickly, and then I'm going to speak to 2 more things, and then I'm going to open it up. I know we're just about at time. So what I then do, I share this. This is a fake person, but with real data that has been changed slightly so that students can't see. So when a student gets their report, this is like their towards the end of semester report, or this is about halfway through the semester, 14 weeks. This would be 7 weeks in. What time of day did your conflicts occur? So for this person, for Avery, this make-believe person called Avery, that most of their conflicts were in the evening, but also in the morning. During the middle of the day, they don't. Now, this is different for other people. Like, I'll have students that have, 75% of their conflicts are in the afternoon. I actually had a student a couple of years ago who 75% of her conflicts were identified as being in the afternoon while she was at work. And we were able to do sort of a mini coaching session. And what we realized through about a 20-minute conversation and her reflecting on her data, just even seeing where conflict was showing up for her in her life, was that around 2 p.m, she gets hangry at work. And that's when she's more reactionary and more, and where she gets, where there's more tension, where she, where people just get on her nerves easier. And her intervention that she suggested, that she designed, was, I need to have a snack around 2 p.m. And that little thing, I know I still stay in touch with the student. This was back in 2018, she had that realization. She still has a snack around 2 p.m. She's in the same job as she was. She's actually a mediator at the Justice Center in Cleveland. And she, just that small, like, little intervention actually helped her capacity to deal with conflict. Anyway, so there's a lot of data the students get. They get the results of all these questions. And then I ask them, I have a few structured journals at the point just after each of these sharings of data, where they then are able to reflect on this data at a deeper level, and then I ask them, what are some small incremental changes that you can make based on what you're learning about yourself? And then they do it. And I also ask that I do the conflict styles through U.S. Institute of Peace. I do their conflict styles survey, self-assessment at the beginning of the semester. For a lot of our students, it's their second time doing it. But based on that, they're supposed to identify something that they want to work on throughout the course of the semester at the very beginning of the semester. And I try to frame it as, what conflict style do you use the least or shows up least in your assessment? And I encourage students to work on utilizing that conflict style more when appropriate, right? To become a little bit more rounded in their conflict styles. So the final two things I'll add is, after about week 6, I add another layer to this survey. There's another set of questions, and it's specifically asking them to reflect on their conflict styles. What conflict style are they utilizing in that conflict that they're reflecting on? And then a few weeks later, towards the beginning of the semester, I added another layer, and this is my favorite layer, but students aren't ready for it at the beginning because they're still thinking about themselves and how they show up in conflict. But the final layer is, what are the needs of the other individual? What are the interests of the other individual? What are the values or identities that are potentially being threatened from the other individual? And I encourage them, I say, you might know this person well enough and have a relationship with them to be able to speculate, but sometimes to really actively take another person's perspective, you have to ask questions. And so we also get into, like, how do we ask those open-ended questions that allow us to get a sense of where the other person is coming from? And so that we not only, by the end of the semester, a student should be able to have, and this should have, in most cases, it's begun to be ingrained into their thinking when they're in conflict, is how am I showing up in this conflict? Recognizing the context of the conflict. Is this primarily a values, interests, needs, or identity-based conflict? And if so, how so? And how am I feeling, and what conflict style am I bringing to this conflict? And then by the end of the semester, they're also starting to think about, how is the other person showing up in the conflict? What are their needs, interests, values, and identity? And also, what conflict styles are they utilizing, right? And so this is a more structured approach to reflective practice, but it's very intentional, it's very deliberate, and I'm giving students a lot of feedback that they're taking. It's sort of like that, you know, there's a few theorists that talk about looped learning, right? So there's single loop learning, there's double loop learning, there's triple loop learning. And this data that they get, it informs another loop of learning, right? And I'm not only asking them to reflect on it, but then, you know, at points throughout the semester, not every single time they do the reflection am I asking them to, what are you going to do differently next time? But about a few weeks into the semester, I asked them that in a journal reflection, and then a few weeks later, and a few weeks later. So they're getting a lot of information, they're reflecting a lot, and then they're intentionally thinking about their practice moving forward. Okay, so I know I'm at time. I'm sorry, folks. I get excited about this, and I haven't presented this concept to a group. I've only done it in the classroom. So this is my first time ever presenting this.
Let me take the moderator's prerogative and make I love it. And I love it because, and I tell you why I like it. It's the idea of positive habit formation. Now,
Yes.
something to be said for that. That is, studies show, I read once, it takes 66 times to make something a habit. It could be a bad habit or a good habit, right? And this is something that's been studied a lot during the pandemic because people were starting to take walks and to doing things they weren't doing before. And now the pandemic is over. Are people still doing it? If you do something like this in class, when the class is over, students are going to still want to do it. And you would hope and would want to still have that process because it was positive feedback for them, right? And so there's a big value there, I would think also. So I posted the in the chat the USIP conflict styles assessment because that's still free and it's out there. So if anybody wants it. So questions for Ty, that was great. I really did enjoy that because I'm doing a lot of reflective practice work myself. So just go ahead and raise your hand or open your mic or whatever. Ask a question, make an observation. Anybody?
I'm curious,
Sarah?
how do students respond to this? Like, you know, I have, like I said, my students reflecting a lot all the time, and they tend to feel a little exhausted by it. So I'm wondering what your experience with students is.
Well, it's a great question, Sarah. Here, I think there's my experience, there's always resistance initially. I've never had a student in the first couple of weeks be like just excited to fill this out twice a week, right? I think once they get that first set of data feedback, like they see this is actually informing something, and that they are then able to reflect on it and make sense of it from a more objective perspective, they get excited about it. I rarely have I've been doing this since 2017, and my form has shifted and changed over the years. Like it's an ever evolving work in progress, right? But since I started doing this in 2017, I have not had one student, and this is probably 60 plus students that have gone through the capstone course in that period of time. I've not had one student not fill out all of their required logs for the semester. And I have had at least a dozen students ask if the link is still going to be open for them when the semester is done. Because they begin to they find that it is helpful for them. I have a student that was right around this same time as the student that I had just shared. I saw a couple of months ago, who I think he graduated from Tri-C in 2019. He's gone on to get a bachelor's degree in neuroscience, and has his own company, and just a really bright kid. He's like, Ty, I use what I learned in that capstone class every single day. And it's been 5 years. And I believe him, right? And I think part of that is because we were actively making the unconscious conscious, right? There were, and by the end of the semester, yes, it was probably a headache, and people didn't always like filling it out, but it became a habit, it became routine, it becomes routine, and it becomes easier as it goes along. And that's part of the reason I don't throw all those questions on at first. After students have filled it out once or twice, they get into some form of routine. They know what to expect. They're already thinking about it when they're in conflict about, oh, this is a perfect situation to put on in my interpersonal conflict log for this week. And so I've found, Sarah, that students actually really enjoy it, but it takes 2 to 4 weeks for them to fully be bought in. And sharing that data with them actually is oftentimes that turning point for them.
You got to do the app now, right? I mean, this is what's got to go, Ty, right?
What? Yeah.
On your watch.
I've thought about it.
Yeah. More questions I mean, we're now in the question and answer period to 1:15, and maybe we'll go another 10 minutes and take a 5-minute break. So more questions for Ty, please.
I have a question, Ty. Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, can you say a bit more about the conflict styles work you do for USIP and how that pans out for them?
Yeah, so David shared the link to the conflict styles assessment in the chat. And so for the students at the beginning of the semester, I asked them to fill that link out and basically report their assessment findings or results. And there's a journal assignment that's attached to that. They have to kind of reflect on their results and talk about, does this resonate? How does this show up in your life? And then what is, if I have a student that is like overly conflict avoidant and not very, competitive, I ask them, I'm like, where are opportunities in your life to be a little bit more assertive, right? And I work with them to kind of define what are some areas that they could work and grow in. And so I don't know if that makes sense, Susan, but we check in about that throughout the course of the semester too, is like, okay, are you consciously doing this work? How is your assertiveness improving, or how is it changing, or where are some of the struggles that you've experienced, or boundary or obstacles that you've come across in these efforts? And I sort of have a coaching session with students around this at the beginning of this. I require students to meet with me 3 times individually throughout the semester for this capstone course. And so one of the first sessions, we talk about the results of their conflict styles assessment and begin to think about, okay, what do I want to focus on, in terms of conflict styles throughout the semester. And so for every student, it's a little bit different, but I am very much of the mind that, and other scholars and researchers will back me on this, that there is not one right way to deal with conflict every single time in terms of conflict styles. The collaborative problem-solving style is wonderful in theory, but in reality, it doesn't always work, right? And so part of my mission is to encourage students to think about and hopefully develop towards being a more well-rounded in terms of their conflict styles. And so that's part of how we work with conflict styles in that class, Susan. And it shows up towards the middle of the class again, when there is a specific set of questions in their interpersonal conflict log that are asking them to reflect on their conflict style in that interpersonal conflict that they experience. So
you're using the USIP guide in your class.
Yes. Yep,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I have them fill it out at the end of the semester too, and see if it shifts.
It's one of the few legacies of USIP working with college groups. I must tell you, USIP has kind of scrubbed a lot of their college and university resources over the years, but they have kept it's basically the Thomas Kilmann conflict style. It's still there, so I'm glad. Maybe one more question for Ty, and then I'll give everybody a 5-minute break. Another question, please. Hey, Tu, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Todd. Are you able to share, and I think Sarah also mentioned in the chat, to share your questions? And I believe you're using the Google Doc. Is that correct?
I'm using Google Doc for that. Yeah. And yes, I can share. What I'll do is I will pull them. I'll save kind of like a PDF file of them of a full survey, so you can see the different sections, and I can share that with the group.
Yeah, you can always, anybody can share it with me and I'll share it with everybody else.
Okay.
And that's not a problem. It's easy to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. And quickly, do you use it a new form each semester? Or is it accumulative?
Oh yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. I make almost every semester I make slight tweaks to it. Like I feel like having started doing this in 2017, I'm making less and less tweaks because I feel like I'm honing into something that is working. I do copy the form and make a different live form for the current class. So and close the form for the old class. But I have all the data from all these years, right? That I could easily, I can't research or write about it because I haven't done any, I haven't had approval through IRB to use this as data for research, but I am thinking about it. If anyone is interested, it's actually one of the projects I'm thinking about for this upcoming year is to think about how do I create something that can then be shared with other educators. But also I do a little bit of coaching in my side business, the Reframe Conflict stuff. And I've started to use this with some of the folks that I coach, who are oftentimes mid to high level leaders in nonprofit organizations, right? Who deal with a lot of conflict. And this tool works for the coaching as well. And so I'm thinking about, to David's point, like, how do we design, something that can be shared and replicated with others who are engaged in this work, both in the classroom teaching, but also coaching and advising and educating, other adults around. It's really the development of like raising awareness around conflict and growing our consciousness and our competencies for dealing with conflict more constructively. That's how I think about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks, Ty. Give Ty a round of applause. Thank you so much, Ty. It's about 1:07. Give everybody 5 minutes or so. Come back about 1:14 or something like that, 1:15. And if you want to check out, if you want to stay in the room, that's great too. And I know Heather has joined us. Hey, Heather from Colorado. I know Nanette is coming in. She'll be in within the next minute or so. And so the next 45 minutes will be a conversation. I'm going to ask them some questions. I'm hoping you would ask them some questions about their careers, because they both started their careers from community college and kind of went from there. So come back in 5 minutes if you can.
Great. Thank you all.
Resume recording, and remind you all that we are recording. It's great to keep your cameras on. You don't have to keep your cameras on, of course, if you'd rather not. Make sure your nameplate reflects who you are. And I encourage people to also put in their pronouns in their nameplate if they feel comfortable doing that. So I really love the last session. Thank you, Ty. Reflective practice is one of my favorite topics, and figuring out innovative ways of doing it and really making it, I think the challenge is just to make it something that we do all the time, right? To make it habit and just kind of natural, something that we kind of it's like hardwired into what we do. And it's just not as practice as individuals. We always have to stop and think about what we're doing and how we're doing it and so forth. And it also shows you, at least in our seminar, that we've been focusing a lot on pedagogy. Yesterday, we were really talking about experiential learning with my colleagues, Sarah and Sharon and Layla from Austin Community College. So reflective practice, experiential learning, these are really good things to talk about in community college and how they're important and how we get away from kind of the normative, PowerPoint people to death and getting up and being a talking head and lecturing and that kind of stuff. And the more we can stay away from that, the better. And I think it's a challenge in community colleges because those people who teach in community colleges are teaching so many courses. There's a lot of content, particularly if you're dealing in a pre-professional program. So you feel like I just got to do PowerPoint. And you're kind of forced to do that when in fact, we all know that's not the best way of learning, right? Anything that we can make experiential, any way that we can include reflection, we're going to really have a better outcome for our students going forward. And it's hard when you're teaching 5 courses a semester and you're teaching 2 nights a week and so forth. So, I think four-year faculty often don't appreciate how community college faculty, what they do to create these environments and how hard it is. You'll talk to 4-year college faculty and they say, oh, it's tough this semester. I have to teach 2 courses. And I'm saying, it's tough because you have to teach 2 courses. What? Right? When I know people have to teach 5 courses every semester. I know you have to do other things besides the 2 courses, but we all know that conversation. So anyhow, so we're going to do for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to talk about people working in the field. And I always like to bring individuals who kind of started their academic journey in community college and are now doing fabulous things. And I've been just very blessed to get to know Heather as a student of mine at George Mason, Nanette as someone that I met later on working in the Forage Center. Actually, I think I met Nanette originally when I gave a talk up in Massachusetts somewhere at the University of Massachusetts years ago, who are just 2 fabulous women and doing really fabulous work. And you don't always learn right away that they started in community college. Though I must know, Nanette, about it because Nanette's graduation speech at her community college is, I think it's on YouTube, isn't it, Nanette? Your graduation speech? Yeah. So Nanette gave her graduation. And then I came to learn that that Heather went to Tulsa Community College. And I think it was about the time that I went to Tulsa Community College and gave a talk there. And then I don't know if Heather was my student at the time or whatever. And
David, I think if I remember right, it was whenever you had the conference was in person, this conference.
Right.
I decided to help you, but you didn't know. Yes. You didn't know that I had gone to community college, and then somebody was there from TCC.
Right.
Wait, I went there, and then it was like a whole thing. So yeah.
Right. Because we used to do this at Northern Virginia Community College. And it's important for us to recognize that our students in community college, of course, many of them higher education experience in community college will be their only higher education experience. And I think that is really important for us to recognize, in that once they're out of our orbit, they're not going to be in higher education. And as a result, maybe puts a higher burden of responsibility for us. But also to recognize that the experience that we give them in community college can be the first step to wonderful experiences they can continue to have through education, then can have in their professional life, recognizing that they kind of started in community college and the things that they've done since then. So I want to introduce both Heather and Nanette. And then what I'm going to do is going to ask them a couple of questions. But I really want to bring you all in the conversation because you have community college students, or you're community college students yourselves. And so really asking them about your own experience. So Heather currently serves as the interim director of training at the Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners in Denver. In that role, she works with directors, quality assurance, peer support services, and crisis services departments to develop and enhance training content and evaluation. She also volunteers for DC Peace Team, an unarmed civilian protection organization that's based in Washington, DC. Her overseas work includes working as a program manager for nonviolent, I just knocked that thing out. Hold on a second. Sorry. For nonviolent peace force in South Sudan, and project coordinator for the National Association for Vocational Training and Social Services in Beirut, and as a grant writer for Blossom Trust in Tamil Nadu, India. She has a Master's of Science in Conflict Analysis and Resolution from the Carter School at George Mason University, a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Central Oklahoma, but she started her educational experience at Tulsa Community College in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In addition to all she does, she's also volunteers for the Forage Center as a program specialist. Nanette Irabarata currently serves as the Director of Public Policy Advocacy at the United Way of Southern Maine in Portland, Maine. Prior to that, she was an advisor for the Nourishment Economies Coalition. In addition, she has worked as a U.S. congressional intern. Her international work includes serving as an assistant coordinator for refugee settlement for the International Rescue Committee in Bujumbura, Burundi. Nanette has a master's degree in sustainable international development from Brandeis University near Boston, and a bachelor's degree in political science from St. Joseph's College in Sandwich, Maine. And she has an associate's degree from Southern Maine Community College. And of course, like Heather, she volunteers her time when she can with the Forage Center as a program specialist. So I'm really, really blessed and fortunate to have both of these young professionals working with the Forage Center. So what I want to start off is I just want to kind of go to both of you and just, first of all, tell us more about the work you're doing now. And I'll start with Heather and then go to Nanette. Tell me a little bit about the work. And then you and I, three of us, are going to have a conversation, and I'm going to kind of have that lead to the work you have been doing, talking a little bit how maybe your community college experience informed what you were doing, and go from there. So Heather, tell us about what you're doing now and kind of how you got to where you're doing now. I know you kind of just recently been promoted, it seems, a little bit, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm in an interim role at the moment. I think that the position is soon going to be filled, so I'll because I'm doing interim training director and then also my training manager position. So once the position is filled, I will just continue on with my training manager position. So yeah, I don't know if you all have heard of 988 or not, the number 988. It's a number that people can call instead of 911 for mental health crises, and it's attached to the National Suicide Hotline. So our organization, we answer it for Colorado, and my job essentially right now, because our main focus in terms of training has been trying to hire and recruit a lot of people to answer the phones for 988, get everybody trained and ready. So that's part of my job as the training manager and interim director, trying to get all these people trained and ready for the phone. Our training is pretty rigorous compared to some other call centers in the US. Like we have a four-week training, whereas like some other people have like a 2-day training. So ours is pretty rigorous. So we do like 4 weeks and we do back-to-back trainings. And as for crisis, we also have a peer services line, which I help with a little bit, some of that training too. But yeah, they're just two different parts of the line. So that's what I'm doing now. And my career has sort of, I don't know if I want to say all over the place, but it's just been different throughout my entire career. And before this job, I was working in as a correctional officer in a jail in Golden, Colorado with youth. And I learned a lot in that job. It was just not for me because I'm a very non-violent, non-physical type person, and you had to restrain kids, and I was like, I can't do this. But nonetheless, it was very interesting work. Before that job, I was working abroad. I think David touched a little bit on what I did. I worked abroad for almost 4 years. I worked in South Sudan for 2 years. And then, with Nonviolent Peace Force, we did various work, mostly unarmed civilian protection. And that includes like different gender-based violence work. That includes, trainings with youth in the community. But we were really living in the trenches, if you will, with the community and directly training them or working with them and just doing like different protection assessments, because overall we worked in the protection branch, so of humanitarian work. And then before that, I was working in Lebanon, and I worked at a couple of just local NGOs there. And a lot of that work was with, with different refugees in the refugee camps there. So it was either with Palestinians or Syrians. One project that I worked on in particular was with Palestinian women who were working on creating their own Tetris business, and it's like a method of sewing. I don't know how to describe it as well as they would, of course, but it's a beautiful method of sewing, and it creates like these beautiful patterns. So yeah, anyways, they were creating their own business, and so like I was working on like business trainings and just different types of trainings with them, and also learning a lot from them too. So yeah, and then before that, I was at George Mason. I'm kind of like going back in chronological order since I started with present day. And then yeah, I was at George Mason, UCO, and of course I started at a community college. My schooling career, I didn't think I wanted to go to college at all after high school. I was really one of those high school students that was not a straight A student. I was actually, I had to retake classes. I hated school. I really, really hated school. Like I hated it so much. I was like, forget school. Like, I don't want to do it. Like, I don't even know what I want to do. I'm not going to go to college. Like, it doesn't really matter. My parents didn't go to college. So I was like, okay, they were successful. Like, it's fine. I don't have to go, right? But then I had a conversation with my dad, and he was pretty much like, you know what, just try it. If you just try to go to TCC, Tulsa Community College, if you like it, continue. If you don't go. And I was like, okay. So my dad actually knew how to talk to me, because if he would have been like, no, you have to go, then I would have rebelled and said, nope, I'm not listening to you. Like, I'm going to do my own thing. And so I went. My first semester, I fell in love with school. And I was like, whoa, like actually learning stuff is fun. Like I enjoyed it. And I think that if I wouldn't have started if I would have started at a university, just having, my background in education, I probably would have dropped out, honestly, because I think it would have been too much for me. And so I loved it. And I loved it so much that it took me, because of my educational background, it took me 6 years total to get my bachelor's degree. So 4 of those years I spent in community college. And I just loved it. Like I had to take a lot of courses that didn't count for credit. And so about 2 years of courses, like I was just taking, because I needed to get to the level of like a college student. So it just took me longer. But I stuck it out because I loved it so much. I was like, oh, well, if it takes me 6 years, it takes me 6 years, like I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna get my associates, and then I'll figure out where I want to get my bachelor's. And then I loved it so much, I wanted to continue to get my master's. And so that's how I met David at George Mason. And I love participating in this conference ever since I did the first time, whenever it was at Northern Virginia Community College. Just because of my initial experience with education in high school was horrible, but then I fell in love with it whenever I went to a community college. And so yeah, I just love being a part of these conversations. And yeah, I support community colleges all the way, and I just admire them. I admire the professors, and yeah, and I feel like personally, I have been a success in my career because of, my education, and that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't fall in love with, my community college. So
Thanks, Heather. I'm going to go to Nanette now. Tell us about yourself, same way Heather did, if you wish, and then I'll ask you both some questions.
Great. Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. So my journey is interesting, if I may say. Right now, currently, as David said, I am the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy here in Maine. And as you may know, Maine is an interesting state, not just because it's the second whitest state in America, but it is a state that wasn't used to see someone who looked like me. So now, having that job and being able to go to the state house to do the work I do and have to interact with, the decision makers, and listening to the community and community leaders and elected officials at the local level. It's been really a rewarding, I would say, journey for me. I came to the US in January of 2012 from Burundi. And it was a little difficult, as you all know, because you don't just show up and say, hey, I have my degree from Burundi, or I have this credential, let me just work. No, you have to go back and do school, or you can just take, whatever job that doesn't require that, which most immigrants who have came here find themselves, cleaning some facilities somewhere. I knew when I landed here that wasn't going to happen. I had a little bit of information of what the college system looked like. And because I came with an FY student visa, and with also a scholarship to go to La Roche College, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I compared the difference. So if I go to a 4-year college, this is how much it would cost, and I am new here, I don't know anyone, but it was just easier to choose a community college. But then I was faced with the stigma behind community colleges. When I would be talking to my friends that I'm going there, they would be like, oh, that's an immigrant, school. That's where all immigrants starts, and you feel like in those moments, I felt like, I'm being just diminished. I don't think I'm gonna get far in my life by just going to a community college. But the way I played the game was trying to know every single person in the president's office of the community college, because I knew that if I knew the president and I had a good relationship with that president, he might know other presidents of other colleges, he may just make a call or something like that. So I did, and in the end, really, I did enjoy community college I went to. Like Heather, there's so much you can choose from. There's a lot of classes, a lot of subjects, to choose from. When I went, I was in my head, I always knew that I wanted to be an international lawyer. But the international law really was born out of anger, if I may say. It was also born out of revenge, because growing up in Burundi, going through the genocide and the civil war, and then seeing those people coming back and now running the country, I was like, how come can you be here? You should be in jail. You should be punished for things you have done. So in my head, I was like, if I can be an international lawyer, I can put all of these people in jail or make them pay. That was my young brain thinking at the time. But when I got here and realized that, in the US, there is no one university that can give you a straight degree in international law. They have to be other pieces to it that are focusing on the American law before you can get to the international law. I was like, well, okay, let me find something else. And because I also loved politics and economy, I was like, okay, maybe political science sounds good. So that's what I did. I took a lot of classes for political science and economy and business. Like Heather too, some of the classes were not transferable to the 4-year college. But then when I got to St. Joseph's College, and then we took the same classes that were not transferable, the notes were really the same. I'm like, you know, it was really, really frustrating, the process that I was going through, and also no understanding how all of that works, you know, who decide which credit you get to transfer, you know, and when and how. It, it wasn't really a good experience in that way. But I kept my head up, and I went from Southern Maine Community College to St. Joseph's, really had a great time. And while I was doing all of that, I was working 3 to 4 jobs with a lot of coffee. That's what really saved my life while I was in school. It was a lot of coffee, and then ended up at Brandeis University, which was a different, really experience, but at the same time, an amazing experience, because I got to go to school with people who came from all over the world, different backgrounds. You know, sometimes I joke that I didn't really learn much from Brandeis professors, but I learned a lot from my peers who were going to school with me. And from there, because really it has been hard to find a job in things that I was going to school for or that I have learned before. So I had to structure my career in the United States. It was kind of starting, you know, at the bottom and then build myself up, which is what I have done. When I was in Boston, it really, everybody, after we graduated from our master's program, everybody was getting jobs, you know. And then I felt like I was stuck while I was talking to my peers. Some of them have came to school, you know, while they were working already, you know, in these international organizations. Yes, I had a background with the International Rescue Committee, but it was different now being here. Just accepted that it wasn't gonna work like other people's. You know, I had my own journey and I had my own race to run. In Maine, it was even worse. While I was trying to get a job, you know, I would be told things like, oh, your English is not enough for our clients. And I would be like, oh, but we are communicating. You can hear me. Just tell me you are not going to give me the job, but don't use, you know, your English is not enough, you know, because when you selected my resume, you saw that I am not a native to this country. So you should have understood that English is not my first language. But then I met someone who introduced me to the Nourish Economies Coalition, which really, I would say, has changed the way I look at professionalism and career in general, because in this work, I really got to work with indigenous communities from around the world, and the way they approached life, it was really, really transformative. And having to work with a lot of people who had big seats or who were at these bigger seats, you know, around the world, and then in the same rooms finding, you know, these are the communities that have been marginalized, but now they have a seat at the table. It really transformed how I think about, you know, my career and also where I want to go in my career, and what I have to bring, how I have to show up. And I think that's also what has changed and have given me this work I'm doing now with United Way of Southern Maine, because I think it's important to show up as a whole, as a human being, but also still advocate for you, for, you know, for I understood that some of these organizations, they didn't really have a lot of people who looked like me. So I had to create my own space inside the organization, which has been but I'm just grateful that I am able to advocate for myself in a way that I don't think I could have done it if I didn't have, you know, people like across the country who are, you know, advocating for people who look like me. So that really has been a big shift in my career. And to be honest, I don't know where I'm going from here. You know, I know that I want to keep growing, and I still want to be into the international arena, like the international organization. But even me saying that, it sounds crazy because United Way is an international organization, right? It's in 40 countries. But when I look, you know, the map of where we are, it's in rich countries and middle income countries. You know, it's not like being in developing countries, where I think I want to do more work. But at the same time, another reality that I have been able to come to, I'm like, yes, you can think global and then, you know, be local and do some work here that can also be transformative in our world.
So let me ask you both one follow-up question, and then I'm going to turn it to everybody else. And I'm trying to pull something from what you talked about in community college. So one of the things that you said, Nanette, in community college, which is really important for you, is to get to know as many people as possible, to network and to kind of put yourself out there. And that made a big difference. That is not being afraid to talk about your story, your experiences in Burundi, to meet other faculty and other students, right? And was that easy for you? Is that a natural for you? Is that something that you developed in community college to some extent? Because that was your first educational experience when you got to the United States.
Yes, I would say it was a little bit of survival, if I may say, because growing up as an orphan and not having the basic needs, sometimes you come up with this habit of getting what you need. And sometimes that will be just by talking with people and talking to people you don't even know to see if they can help you. So I kind of turned that on when I got to community college, because I was like, there's no other way. I didn't have any family members here. I didn't have any friends. So I had to create. And the only way I could do that was at school, because I spent a chunk of my time during the day at school. And then I would do overnights at other jobs. But I think, I don't know if I would say it was natural. I had to do it. There was no any other way. So that was the only way for me. And then today, though, that has helped me, you know, because I am a natural now when it comes to building relationships. So I don't shy away from connecting with people.
So let me ask Heather, because what I got from your thinking about community college is you finally realized that you can love learning, that you had hated learning as a high school student. All of a sudden, you're loving learning. So what was it about the learning or the way learning was experienced in community college that made such a difference to you, Heather?
Yeah, I think because, well, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I was just kind of taking, you know, just the basic courses that like you have to take, you know, as I can't remember what those are called now.
General education.
Yeah.
Gen Ed.
Yes, Gen Ed courses. So simple. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. So yeah, Gen Ed courses, and then so yeah, it was my choice. And even just like being in the English classes, I don't know, they were just so different than high school. And I felt like I was just being in the environment with like other students who wanted to learn. The professors were very accommodating to my learning style. And then I also remember just speaking of networking, and then because like I never really talked to my teachers in high school, and so I thought professors in college, like they don't have time for that, like they have so much to do, I'm not going to talk to them. But then my intro to psych course, like it was like Psych 101. I was like, whoa, this is so interesting. Like, I think I might want to get a degree in this. And so I told my my TCC professor that, and I was like, hey, I'm actually really interested in this course. Like, I'm thinking about changing my degree to psychology. And he's like, oh, wow, really? He's like, let's set a time. Let's go have lunch and we can talk all about it. And I was like, wait, what? Like, you actually want to have a meeting with me and have lunch with me? Like, and so we went to like this amazing, it was like just like a local seafood place, but it was like a really good place in Tulsa, like right next to the college. And so I just felt like so lucky to be able to have like this time with my professor, and we talked all about psychology, and he was able to, talk about like, so I didn't know what kind of, pathways there were. And so he was able to talk about different career pathways. And for some reason, I always remember this. I actually did work in jail a little bit, but he really was pushing for prison psychology. I don't know why. I don't know if that was like his thing. I'm not sure why he did that, but he also talked about other things too, but he talked a lot about that one in particular. Anyway, so I just thought like, this is so cool. Like I can, talk to my professors about things and they can help me think through it. And I just felt very welcome. And, same for the other students, like they were, in a similar boat as me. Not really knowing what they want to do. So I think community college is also a great place to start to figure that out too. Like if you don't want to just feel intimidated by jumping right in a university, so.
All right, let's take some questions. So just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you, or I guess you can just open your mic too, but I want some questions from the audience. We're all community college people, so we've got some questions, I'm sure.
Well, it's great to hear both of your
Susan,
stories.
go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, it's great to hear both of your stories. And I was just hoping, and I remember meeting Nanette, David, at one of your seminars a few years ago. It was just wonderful to hear. I think that at that year, Nanette, you were giving your memoir of your journey from Burundi. And I remember it pretty vividly. So thanks for being here and sharing. I would love to hear more about what both of you are doing today and the work you're doing today and what's most meaningful to you about your work today.
Yeah, would you like to go first, or?
Yeah, and let's make 2-minute answers because I want to get a lot of questions in. So go ahead, Nanette, tell us more about your work.
Maybe your connections with indigenous communities is really interesting. Yeah.
Yes, and I have not let that go, to be honest. I find myself going back to my old boss. Is there anything I can do to help, or just having a conversation? Because it was a meaningful work that I think our world need today. And actually, a few weeks ago, I attended a conversation between our governor, Governor Mills, and then Governor Lepage, who's running. And there I saw my professor, who was also my advisor at the community college. And we were talking about, for some reason, circular economy came up in the conversation. And we knew one of the professors also at the University of Southern Maine who's, interested in that. But then she was like, that person can never talk to me. I have been trying to talk to that professor for 6 years now, right? And when I think about your question, Susan, what I'm doing now, I think what I have been trying to do is really work with young people, especially the young people in the immigrant community who are finishing high school, but like Heather, who don't really know what's to come, or who don't want to go to college, or they are like, it's too much money, or I don't like school. So I am part of this group that it's kind of advising them by sharing our stories, but also by helping them find the better place and better choices for them. And today what I'm using, I'm like, here in Maine, we have, for the next 2-3 years, we have a free community college. How about start there? So that's really what I'm taking my advocacy hat that I have at United Way, and I'm going and using it, in the immigrant community, because I think that it's important that I don't just keep my success to myself, but that I share with, the young generations that are coming behind me. So I have taken that on, and I'm loving it. I see how I have missed, just chatting with young people. It's just great.
Heather, we're good to Heather.
Sure. So a little bit about now, I think just a common thread, I think that's been in a lot of my jobs is, working at the grassroots level has been really important to me, because that makes me feel closer to, just to the type of work that I want to do. So for example, right now, like I'm not the one to actually answer the phones for people in crisis in Colorado, but my contribution is just, more education wise, like educating the people who are going to be answering the phones and trying to get them prepared as best as possible to answer the phones for people in crisis at a local level in Colorado. So for me, I think if I can find that common thread of just working in at a grassroots level, like wherever I'm working, to me, that's really important for my work.
Logan, you had a question, I know. So go ahead and let you ask your question.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, what did y'all feel was the biggest difference in culture between the classrooms in your community colleges versus the classrooms in your universities?
I would say being at the community college, for me, there was a lot of wealth, because some people who were in my classrooms were not just a 17 or 18-year-old. I went to school with a 72-year-old, and we graduated at the same time. There was that. There were a lot of backgrounds in class, in ages, in where people were coming from, not just people were born in America, but immigrants. Or another thing I would say, my classes had a lot of Canadian people. So that was really fun to see. And then when I went to the regular college after my 2-year at SMCC, it was different. I was the oldest in those classes. So they have been the shift, from coming from the community colleges, having those really rich conversations. Now, every time I turn and try to talk to my classmate, or have conversation or do something together, we didn't really have much in common, besides just showing up in class. So that was the difference.
Interesting. Heather?
Yeah, I can agree with Nanette. I think the diversity of your fellow students changed. Even the class size changed, because at least for my community college, we had the smaller classrooms, and then whenever I got to my university, like we had those, some classes had the big stadium classrooms. I was like, whoa, this is like in the movies. Like I was like, this is a whole new thing. And then also, I actually really loved some of my professors in my undergraduate, but they seem like they just had a lot more students than the ones at community college. I don't actually know if that's true or not. David, you might be able to speak to that, but I don't know if that's true, but that's just what it seemed like. And I think just the fact that I had that time in community college to figure out what I wanted to do. In university, like in my undergrad university, I was able to be focused, in that, since I had already figured out, I was like, all right, well, I already know I'm getting my undergrad in psychology, like I can focus on that. Whereas like my community college was kind of like, I had that room to decide.
Yeah, the personal attention is the one thing that people remember from community college that they lose when they go off. And you were in a big state university too, Heather. Nanette was more of a liberal arts institution that you went to, so it is really something to value. Other questions? Take a few more questions. I mean, go a little bit beyond two, but not too far. So who else has a question? Just Ty, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you both for sharing. One of the things that I've come across in lots of conversations with community college students is they're, a semester or two away from completing their associate's degree, and they're trying to figure out whether or not they should go and get their 4-year degree and continue their education. And I guess I'd love to hear for the two of you, like, what was that experience like when you were kind of like getting towards the end of your experience and considering your next steps? I have so many students that they're like, can I just, go out and get my dream job with my associate's degree? And I'm like, I wish. And for some of them, they have the knowledge and the skills and the capacity to be in those roles, but an associate's degree on a resume it's not gonna bring them up to the interview level, right? So I am trying to figure out how to like have those conversations with students, like when they're in that moment of like considering what their next step is, what's going on in their minds, and how do I support them in the best way possible in as they're making decisions that are going to impact the rest of their life, right? I don't know. I know I'm reflecting a lot, and I don't have a specific question. I just love to hear the two of your thoughts on that.
I can go first. I think the best way for me at least was having the professors or the community members that I have built at the community college ask me, what do you want in life? Think about 5 years from now, what do you want to do? Really that changed a lot because like so many immigrants, when you get here, your brain is, I just need to make money so that I can be able to support the family that has left behind, or get myself into a better situation, and that was what I was thinking. But at the same time, with me, it was a little different because I knew that I needed to get educated in order to succeed in America, period. And that meant I need to go get my PhD. All the applications I wrote, that was still basic. I just need to do that. But to your question, Ty, I would say really trying to understand where the students want to be, because in today's world, I won't just say, oh, your 2-year student associate degree won't get you anywhere, because that's an assumption we have today that I believe it's not true. If, for example, someone has been working to go do something, I don't know, maybe become a firefighter, I won't tell that person to go get a master's if that's their dream job, right? So a 2-year associate degree will be okay. So it's really understanding where they want to go in life and what type of jobs they see themselves in, and then go from there. Because one of the things I also learned when I came here is this idea of we all have to go to college, or we all have to have masters, to be able to succeed or survive in our livelihoods. But that's no longer the case, at least from what I'm seeing, because I'm still connected to all the universities I went to. And that is really what I will say. As they prepare to get to their next journey, it's maybe trying to understand what they want to do and help them from there.
I'm going to jump in real quickly before Heather answers this question. We are doing a really existential reevaluation of higher education in America today, right? This idea is that the idea of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s is that you go to college, everybody goes to college. It's like, wait a minute, right? If you start to think about where we need people to work and where that gap is in manufacturing and other areas, does everybody need to get a master's degree to do manufacturing? No, that's not what we need to do, right? We need to do that, right? Kind of a thing. So I think about the guy who's the guy who Rowe, what's that guy who does dirty jobs, right? And Mike Rowe, right? He talks about this idea that does everybody need to go to college? No, some people do, some people don't, right? And we need to think about that. So anyhow, Heather, I'm going to turn to you. I'm sorry. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I think you made some really good points in it. And I think it just, goes to like, what are they doing? What do they want to do? So for me, for example, I knew with psychology, like I was going to need to get my bachelor's. And then after that, like I knew if I wanted a job that was a little bit more involved, then I'd have to get my master's and, maybe my PhD. And so like there was all of this thought process going on behind it. So I think it just kind of depends on what they want to do. So it's probably, just per student, like depending on who can ask you. And I also know like, especially students at community college, like it depends on their life circumstances, because like they probably have families and they probably can't go to school full time. Like they have to work full time and they have to, I can't imagine. I have a 9-month-old now. I can't imagine having to try to figure out getting a degree and taking care of my kid and working. And I just can't imagine having that extra pressure. So I get why they might feel like that. I think it just depends on their life circumstances too, right? For me, I was lucky. I mean, I had the time to, continue on for my bachelor's, and I loved school so much. So for me, I didn't even question like that. I just wanted to start working. Like I wanted to continue to go to school. At one point I considered PhD, maybe still somewhere down the line. Now I have a 9-month-old, so that won't be anytime soon. But yeah, I just, I think it just depends on a lot of different circumstances of the student and what exactly they want to do, and how much they enjoy going to school. I mean, I know some people don't enjoy it, but they kind of force themselves through it because they're like, well, I have to do it, so I'm just going to do it. So yeah.
All right, maybe one last quick question and then we'll call it a day. So does anybody have a quick question, and then we'll call it a day? Just kind of open up and go ahead, John. Yeah.
Is it okay to make a comment?
Yeah. Make comment, ask a question. Yeah.
Well, I just think as a community college teacher of 28 years, it's always wonderful to hear somebody find their path in community college. And I think it's well to remember when I was going to a community college, it wasn't called community college. It was called junior college. So there was a big stigma that went along with that. It wasn't really a proper college. It was a junior college. So it's really wonderful to be able to have community and have people from all walks of life. I've had somebody 20 years older than me, take a class, and notice that the people that are older than me do all the reading, not necessarily the youngsters. And I share, when I first started teaching community college, I had a live class with the University of Wisconsin Stout. And I know my students were really afraid. It was a live class, and we would just open up and we would take on the same subject matter, but the responses were very different. And I remember that University of Wisconsin Stout tried to kind of steal our diversity because they had 97% Caucasian population. So they were trying to sell themselves as a very diverse, college, but they were really tapping into our student body to make that happen. And we just had really dynamic classes. And I also tell my students, I'm a playful person. When I come and teach at community college, I said, this isn't my dream job. this is not really where I wanted to teach. And I said, I've been here 24 years now, and I absolutely love it. And I share the possibilities, and I'm very much at home at the community college. It's always lovely to hear people talk about diversity and opportunities. And also if people find their way in a community college, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's what, and we need people to find their way, right? You know, sometimes there's this idea that you have to know exactly what you're going to do all the time, right? Kind of a thing. You know, I'm always puzzled by when you have to declare a major. It's like you're 17 years old and you have to decide a major at 17. That's crazy, right? And how many people actually are working in the field that they got their major in? Nobody, right? It's like, okay, but you are, okay, John, but you know you're a minority, right? Because most people.
No, I was asking a question. I wasn't saying.
No, but isn't it?
No.
But isn't it true though? It's like we make these expectations right away on young people, and community colleges is a great place to kind of saying, well, I'll take a little bit of this, I'll take a little bit of that, I'll take a little bit of this. Maybe it won't take me, maybe it'll take me 3 years to get through. Good, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to you, David. David came to my community college to talk about peace building opportunities. And he made me feel really great about being a community college teacher, and my students as well, because they had all the attributes to be tomorrow's peace builders. Right. That they probably never thought about it. They're bilingual, they come from war-torn communities, they live in the real world, they're working and they're going to school. You know, just, I mean, oh, I didn't really think about that. And they're bringing assets. My community college students are bringing assets that perhaps they don't even know.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful when you enlighten them and say, you've got skills already that perhaps you didn't think about moving forward in peace.
Yeah, that's important. All right, thank you, John. So we'll close on that. It's a little bit after 2. Alina, you want to add something real quickly?
Yeah, I thought I could put out a challenge to all my community college colleagues out there, myself included. It still surprises me. I know you're right, but it still surprises me when I hear that there's a stigma to going to community college. It always shocks me. I don't know why, but I'm thinking to myself, right now, we have the biggest person who could be an advocate for community college in the White House. Maybe we need to call on her and tell her that should be her responsibility to change the perception of community college.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I know Dr. Biden does a lot, but yeah, maybe we ought to do that too. Good challenge, Lena. So if Heather and Nanette, if you want to put your contact information, or you don't want to, that's fine, but put your contact if you want to reach out to you. Thank you both. I'm going to give them another round of applause. We are now done for the day. We will be back next Friday. And next Friday, next weekend, I know, Susan, you're presenting next weekend, right? I think, is it next Friday?
Yeah, it is.
So,
And I actually wanted to just jump in before, but very quickly, and put a plug in for David's book, Peace Jobs, which has been incredibly helpful to me teaching peace studies at Nassau Community College. So that's a great book, and it's been so helpful for me, David, as you know. So
thank you, Susan. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you all. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone that was here today. Thank you, those who came from Sweden, and Sarah, and 2 leftists who was in Vancouver, and East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country. It's wonderful that we all can connect this way. I'll say adieu, goodbye, farewell, have a great week, great weekend, and then we'll be back next
Bye,
Friday.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, folks.